Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Historical Gamer once again. You can call me Matt, and I'm here with the Strategy Wargamer. You can also call him Jean. How you doing today, Jean?
Not bad, Matt. I wanted before we begin, I wanted to congratulate you on hitting 10,000.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, my my YouTube channel just hit 10,000 subscribers, which is pretty awesome, I must say. I never thought I'd get there, but we have another milestone in today's podcast, and this is our 10th episode 10 of Single Malt Strategy. So
10,000 subscribers in the 10th episode. How about that?
Yeah, we're a little bit late. I know it's been maybe like a month since our last episode, which is not the pace that we wanted, but I've been kind of crazy in my own life. House, shopping and holidays and work is crazy, so been a little bit lagging on my availability. And I know I think you said you just went through a move as well, right?
No, I mean, I've been busy with fire department and school and everything like that, so it's on my end. Plus, I've been just coming off. I've been sick the last 2 weeks with the infected tooth, so it's been interesting.
Well, wishing you the best. Hope everything goes well. But today, I know we discussed last time around that we were going to be talking about 2017 and our most anticipated games that were going to be coming out this year. I know that isn't.
Hopefully, it's going to be a better year.
I thought last year was a good year, but I know we're already into February now, so we're already 1/12 of the way through the year, and we're just having this podcast for the first time. But wait a minute, what's that? Oh shit! Are missiles flying?
I have a feeling where you're going with this.
No. Probably not. I'm lazy. It'll show here in a second.
Reminds me of that old
of the PRC podcast. Today, Balogan and the Historical Gamer try to answer the question: is the age of great?
Is that Siri?
No.
Stay tuned and find out. Concludes this message. Please remain calm.
So that obviously shows how lazy I am, in that was obviously not anything to do with our podcast. But I think it was like 2 years ago, I'd been talking with Belugan from Belugan Campaign about doing a podcast, and we came up with the idea of naming it Please Remain Calm. Funny abbreviation is that you can tie that to the PRC, or the People's Republic of China, as well, as sort of like a geopolitical kind of podcast. But that ended up falling through. I had made an intro for it, and I was kind of thinking, like, we probably need something like that for us, right? I mean, it's been 10 episodes, and I don't know. It feels like the kind of fun little thing to do at the start of the podcast. I don't know if we want to use an automated simulated, disaster alert to bring us in, but I thought it'd be fun to do.
Might give people a good impression of what's to come.
Sure, maybe, although maybe not, because obviously if I was really into it, then I probably should have, made one for us as opposed to reusing something that's 2 years old and was never saw the light of day. But that's on me. Anyway, moving forward with episode 10 of the Single Malt Strategy podcast, we decided, hey, let's take a look at some games that we're looking forward to in 2017. We did our wrap-up episode last time around, I believe it was, where we talked about 2016 and our thoughts on that year. And in this episode, we're going to be looking forward to the year that we are currently in and talking about what games have been announced, or what we're excited to play in 2017. So I've been yappering enough. Yappering, is that a term? I've been talking enough already, and I figure, why don't I let you lead off, Jean? What are you looking forward to this year?
So I kind of knocked down my list to 3, and I have 2 honorable mentions. So I'm going to start with the third one on the list and go up from there. So the first one I have on my list is going to be most anticipated. I would have to say Ultimate General Civil War, but the Gettysburg battle, which hopefully will come with vanilla version 1.0. And the reason I'm very this is anticipated for me, is because I want to see what kind of improvements they've been able to get done since Ultimate General Gettysburg to Ultimate General Civil War / Gettysburg scenario. So I want to see what how much more they could have, how much more they can improve that battle in that game.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's interesting that you say that video, because I felt like I was copping out when I included that in my top 5 list. For this episode, I'll only be talking about 3, but I put together a list on my channel, in my YouTube channel, and one of the games I included on that list was Ultimate General Civil War as well. Not specifically the Gettysburg battle, but just in general the game. And it's a little bit of a cop-out, right, because the game's already out, but it's not fully featured yet. So it's one of those... Yeah, it's like not, if even. Half the battles are in, and who knows if they're going to change any of the gameplay elements, or maybe add multiplayer or anything like that.
Sandboxing.
Yeah, so I mean, there is a sandbox element, but there's not really anything in there yet. So I'm really looking forward to Ultimate General Civil War. Anyone who watched my channel saw I put up 40 videos of it last year. So my channel has largely become the Ultimate General channel recently. I'm certainly looking forward to that game in 2017. I'm also interested to see if they do any more variants. So, like, I think one of the interesting things with Ultimate General Gettysburg was the way they built a whole bunch of different kinds or types of battles into the game, so that you could have, a whole slew of alternative outcomes to the Battle of Gettysburg. And right now, the way Ultimate General Civil War is built, it doesn't really support that kind of branching battles, because it's a series of linked battles as opposed to, a single battle with a whole bunch of variables. But it would be interesting to see if they have some sort of branching campaign where, like, if you're the Confederacy and you win Gettysburg, I know they're talking about doing a Washington, D.C. battle. Maybe that would trigger Washington, D.C., as opposed to moving forward and just doing, whatever the next battle is, the Wilderness or whatever. So I think that would behoove them to have a few kind of turning points in the campaign. Not every battle, Bull Run, if the Confederacy wins, nothing changes. But maybe if the Union wins Bull Run, they've got a variant that goes to Richmond with, 1861 Richmond camp. I don't know. Something like that might be sort of the icing on the cake of what, in my opinion, is already a very good game. But a few areas I feel like they could make this an all-time classic.
I think the one thing that I'm really looking forward to is the command and control. The command and control in this game was absolutely epic. Going from a brigade to a division to moving a corps it's incredibly easy. I haven't run into any kind of game that I can come up with that has command and control of those large amounts of units. Even Hearts of Iron, where you're moving armies, it's much more difficult process than this game, where you could literally select the whole corps, and within 2 clicks or 3 clicks, whatever, you can move an entire army corps of 30,000 men to exactly where you need to go. And for them to bring that to the previous title, Ultimate General Gettysburg, but in the Civil War, this is going to be very confusing, but in their current title that they're making, the Gettysburg scenario, if they could bring that command and control into that with all the awesomeness that they had in the previous game, that's going to be awesome. That's going to bring up the value of the game tremendously.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point around command and control, because there's a few other games that let you play with this number of units in terms of like a tactical battlefield. I'm thinking of not quite as large, but any of the Total War games, or Scourge of War. But I think the difference is there. Scourge of War does a good job in that you can select a corps you want to move, and you can issue a blanket order to like put the corps or division or whatever in line. But you don't have quite the level of flexibility of how you want that, how you want those units to stack up. Whereas in Ultimate General, you can just right-click basically and drag the line you want your troops to take, and then they'll form up along the exact line you just drew on the map, basically. And it's a unique and interesting way to do it. Total War, you can select multiple units in the same way, and you can kind of drag and drop that way, but you don't have the same command and control aspects. There's no divisions. There's just individual units. So it's a very different interface. And I think Ultimate General really has hit the nail on the head with the interface of both of their games. thus far, and it'd be interesting to see if they make any further improvements in that. I'm more interested in seeing what direction the campaign goes, but it's definitely on my list for most anticipated games of 2017, even though it's kind of already out.
Other scenarios that I want them to kind of like approach, like in a lot of these Civil War games, we have the big battles, right? We have Gettysburg, we have Antietam, and and so on and so forth. I want them to capture the other smaller battles, and I'm not going to say smaller, but less popular, I would say, like Shiloh. There's not a lot of games out there that feature the Battle of Shiloh. Another one would be Cold Harbor.
Sure, but they have Shiloh and Cold Harbor. Well, they don't have Cold Harbor yet, but they're going to. It's just a matter of that you don't like the way they handle Shiloh.
Yeah, that's true. But I appreciate them putting it in there, even though I'm not crazy about the way they handled it. I appreciate it's in there because a lot of Civil War games nowadays don't add those certain battles like Cold Harbor, Shiloh. Another one that I would love them for them to add would be Appomattox. And a lot of people are familiar that the Civil War ended at Appomattox, but there was a battle there too. I forgot who fought. I forgot whose corps. I know it was not Longstreet's. But Sheridan, yeah, but I remember there was it was not Longstreet's corps. There was Ewell was captured on the way to Appomattox, or his a significant part of his corps was. But I remember there was a corps that was trying to cross the river, and then the army that James was showing up. But basically, I always wanted like a what if scenario, of Appomattox, because Lee kind of decided, well, look, I'm not going to go for an all out of, Armageddon kind of battle. And I'm going to surrender the army, and this is the end.
Well, he didn't have much. He had like 20,000 men left, but.
Yeah, but I always wondered, what if? Would it be possible to break out? Could I take, Longstreet's corps and somehow do whatever I can, make like an arrow and just push right through the Union lines, and maybe I can get maybe a division or two out. I always wanted a game that could set that up for me, so I can give that a shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difficulty the Confederacy was facing by that point is, despite sort of the sort of ragged, resilient army look, it was very reliant on a conventional military supply structure. It was not prepared to be a guerrilla war guerrilla unit. By the time they lost Richmond, that was such a huge part of their ability to supply themselves, that entire Richmond area and the supply lines leading up. Maybe they could have broken out and gotten into North Carolina, but they wouldn't have had they would have had the resources that they brought with them, and that's it. They would have had no ability to resupply themselves, get more ammunition. Food and forage would have been scarce. Sure, maybe they could link up with Joseph E. Johnston, but then you still have, 40,000 men total against two armies, each over 100,000 men, and each well-supplied versus your army that might have enough supplies for one engagement. I mean, realistically, I don't think there was much they could do.
I think Sherman was around 60,000. So
largely because he was so spread out, though, garrisoning and kind of ravaging the countryside. When he was concentrated in front of Atlanta, I believe he had around 100,000 men.
Yeah, but he split a sizable portion to go to follow what's his name to follow John Bell Hood. I remember John Bell Hood took command of the army, and he separated the army, his army.
Yeah, but Hood was destroyed by that point. So anyway, I mean, I think in my opinion, if they were gonna do like an operational level game where you're kind of having maneuver outside the battlefield, I think the most interesting way to handle it would be look at the overland campaign. I think by the time Appomattox happens, it's too late. But it would be really interesting to look at an operational level game that focuses on the overland campaign, where the Army of Northern Virginia starts out pretty strong still, 70,000, I think, men roughly. And the Army of the Potomac, while it's, around 100,000 still, that whole month of just constant combat and fighting and, the Confederacy getting to the last of their reserves, and the Union bleeding itself so white it had to pull troops out of the, Washington fortifications who had never seen combat before, only to get them butchered at Cold Harbor. I mean, that campaign, despite the fact that it was so bloody, I think is underrepresented because people think of it as just, Grant slamming his head against a brick wall until eventually he broke through, or, pushed the Confederacy into a siege. But I do think it's underrated in that Grant kept up a flanking, maneuver. The entire advance down Richmond, it was flanking attack after flanking attack after flanking attack. There was a lot of maneuver, a lot of tactics involved, and certainly a lot of potential alternatives you could take as a commander if you wanted to do an operational level game. But I think we probably spent enough time on Ultimate General Civil War, so we'll move along and talk about our next topic in our most anticipated games of 2017, and we both had Ultimate General Civil War. So I'll go with the second
one.
I'm sorry.
That was one of your. Okay. So
yes, it was definitely on my list for most anticipated. Kind of paradoxically again because it's already out, but it's not really done. But another game I have on my list of most anticipated games is called Afghanistan 11, which I don't know if you've heard about that. But it is...
Yeah, I looked at some screenshots.
Yep, it's basically the sequel to Vietnam 65, except it puts you in Afghanistan, so very different conflict. And it actually, I believe, based on what I've read, I know it's in beta, but I haven't seen it yet. Based on its feature set, though, it makes the case that it seems like it's a bit deeper than Vietnam was. Which that's interesting to me, because one of the issues I had with Vietnam was it was so abstract. It's like you're somewhere in the Ai Drang Valley, but it's more like Vietnam as a whole, right? Because it's not limited to 1965. You've got political points that allow you to bring in reinforcements. As you take casualties or call in troops, you use those up. And, it's kind of this, eventually you've got to start withdrawing. Whereas that's not 1965 in Vietnam, right? That's the whole Vietnam experience, from build up to plateau to, withdrawal. So it's more of like just a high level operational level game with abstract cities and towns and not really, to me, telling much more than sort of a theater based combat, but reflective of the whole war. And Afghanistan, I'm interested to see how they handle that, because I think they said they've got like an 18 mission scenario or campaign. So it's got multiple different maps, it would seem. It's got multiple different stories. It's saying it's including things like, the ability to build infrastructure to try and pacify regions. So it's got some elements of nation building in there. It just seems like an overall, deeper game. It still looks simple and approachable, but it looks like something that could be really interesting, because there are not enough games out there that try and deal with counterinsurgency. And I see a lot of promise in this game. But
there's not even a lot of games out there that even deal with Afghanistan.
No, I mean, I don't know if there's any games that deal with Afghanistan that I've seen.
Yeah,
there's a few board games, like, I think, is Fire in the Lake Afghanistan? Or is that Vietnam?
Which one?
Fire in the Lake. I can't remember if that's Vietnam or Afghanistan. But there's a coin or counterinsurgency series of board games, but I'm not aware of much in the way of computer games out there. So it'll be interesting to look at, especially considering it's, about Afghanistan, which is, the time period it's talking about was only 6 years ago. So certainly recent. I'm guessing it'll still be somewhat abstract. It's not going to be detailing specific units or what have you. I doubt it. But,
especially since we're there.
Yeah. But I'm intrigued, and I definitely am looking forward to playing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the games that it's not on my list, but I am looking forward to it. It's coming out soon, from what I've heard. So I'm really looking forward to it. I believe it's in beta right now.
Yep, it is in beta right now. I haven't looked at it or applied to be in the beta, but it is in beta for sure.
My second choice would be Carrier Deck. So the Matrix, I think, announced this, or Slytherin announced this a few months ago, and it got on my list because, I don't know if you remember, if you ever saw the movie, what was it? It's with, man, my memory is really bad today, but it's basically, it's called The Final Countdown.
Okay. Yep,
and
I've seen that.
Have you seen that? Okay. And that movie was amazing because, it was, if for our viewers that aren't familiar with it, it's basically a modern day aircraft carrier somehow travels back in time through like a black hole, whatever it was, to 1941, December 6, 1941. And you're basically running that. I mean, the whole movie takes place on that aircraft carrier. And this game has nothing to do with that, but to basically be in that movie where you're controlling what planes go out, because I believe carrier deck takes place in the middle of a war, and you're sending out sorties of bombers or fighters and refueling aircraft. You're basically the top dog on that aircraft carrier, and I think that's a game that we needed for quite a while. I can't remember a game that has focused anything on just carrier operations, retrieving aircraft, which is a huge deal. I mean, carriers are basically the modern day. It's a modern day, basically, air base on the water. So from what from what I'm understanding is whenever there's an international conflict anywhere in the world, first thing the president asks is, where's the nearest aircraft carrier? That's how powerful they are. So to have a game where you can actually be that aircraft carrier and and see the power of it would be kind of awesome.
Yeah, I wonder how into the actual combat it's going to be, though. Based on and it's definitely, I'd consider it an honorable mention game that I'm looking forward to, but I think it's much more of a CAG game where you're the combat or the I don't know the abbreviation, but basically you're the guy in charge of the deck. You're not probably coordinating the actual airstrikes, but you are rearming, refueling aircraft, getting them off the deck, managing that. So it's almost, to me, and I haven't played it, I'm just basing it off of what I've seen, but to me it looks a lot more along the lines of like a tower control game, where you're kind of saying, all right, these planes go here, rearm these, move these over here. It's kind of like a business simulation game, but for the military. I don't know if I haven't seen any screenshots that they posted of like aircraft actually bombing anything.
Yeah, that I was trying to get more information. There was not a lot of detail, but I'm assuming that if it's just sending. I mean, there was certain information on it on the website where it said that you're going to be sending out sorties, and I'm assuming they're going to give you results on like your bombing run or something like that, or how many planes you lost, things like that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they'll give you that, but I don't think you'll actually be participating in the strike. I think it'll be more managing the carrier, and then, you send it off, watch your little children fly away, hopefully they don't crash, but then they come back, and then you've got to rearm them and prepare for the next strike. Meanwhile, who knows, maybe bandits are incoming. You've got to scramble aircraft and get the deck clear, now that you're retrieving aircraft, but, that kind of thing, which is interesting to me in of itself. But I don't think it's going to be much of a combat game. I think it's going to be more like a resource management game.
Well, I'm trying to go through the website right here and trying to get some more information. But from what I've seen of it, even just the visuals of it looked really impressive.
I think it looks really interesting.
So
I think it's something that I get the sense it'll be one of those games that I fall in love with and play the hell out of for 10 to 20 hours, and then it gets really repetitive, and I've got to move on to something different. It looks like one of those games that get really addicting, but then after a while you realize it's the same thing over and over and over again. So we'll see. I don't want to judge a game that hasn't come out too much. I definitely think there's going to be value there, and it's going to be a good game. And interestingly enough, it's made by this same guy who made Vietnam 65 and is making Afghanistan 11. So he's got two games in the pipeline. Yep.
Wow. The one thing that I've noticed that's coming out of Slytherin lately is they're making they're pushing for modes, and I'll mention one down the road in this podcast. But they're really pushing out fan modifications to their games. I wonder if you'll get a couple of eager fans modifying this game to do carrier operations, but in World War II, with Corsairs and Avengers and such. That would be kind of cool.
Maybe it'll be Carrier Deck Japan, and you'll have to make sure you don't load your deck with too many
midway,
too many planes with fuel and bombs just sitting on the deck waiting for the Americans to come in and destroy your fleet.
Yeah, there goes the Akagi,
or any of the other ones. But yeah, so. Yeah, it's a game I'm interested in, but I guess we'll see what becomes of it. Another game, I don't know if it's really in my top 5, but I'm going to mention it. Maybe is more like an honorable mention because I'm intrigued. is, and I don't mean to make this podcast all Slytherin games, but it just so happens that I feel like they're one of the few companies out there that really announces their war games ahead of time. And that is Order of Battle Kriegsmarine. It's a DLC for Order of Battle, which is basically a bunch of Atlantic, Battle of the Atlantic scenarios for the DLC. So, as the Germans or the British or what have you, you've got to, intercept and destroy enemy convoys and win the Battle of the Atlantic, which I'm interested in just because there's like so few games that cover the Battle of the Atlantic. It's one of those topics that is critically undercovered. You'll get some games that cover it in the sense of Silent Hunter, for example, because it's a simulation about the Battle of the Atlantic from the submarine perspective, but very few games put you in control of the whole Kriegsmarine. Atlantic Fleet was one of those, where you have to figure out how the heck am I going to starve the British Empire, which is so much stronger than me. But Order of Battle Kriegsmarine, I assume Norway will be a huge scenario in there, because that was one of the few times the German fleet really set sail in strength and, battled with the Royal Navy. There'll probably be a scenario around Bismarck and Prince Eugen trying to break out and seeing if you can keep the Bismarck alive. But it'll be interesting to see, because I don't really think a turn-based game like that is well-suited to naval combat. I think it's really bizarre when you're doing naval combat and it's, you've got hit points of 10 versus an enemy ship of 6, and -2, -3, -3, now your ship sinks. Like, that doesn't model naval combat in my eyes. Naval combat is often, -1, holy crap, your magazine got hit, -8. And you don't see those kind of critical hits, at least in anything that Order of Battle has done so far. And I have trouble with turn-based naval games doing, justice to naval combat. I don't think they generally handle it well. Destroyers shouldn't have the same rate of fire as battleships. The range obviously needs to be different. Armor seems very difficult to model, other than maybe just jacking up hit points. So I'm more curious about this game than excited. I will definitely cover it, but consider me skeptical, but interested for what that's worth. Yeah, I guess we'll see how that one plays out.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but you can say the same thing. Even for I kind of, to elaborate on that point, for not only Navy but also Army, a lot of games do this, and I play them and it's fine and I enjoy them. But games that show actual troop strength, like a good example would be Scourge of War, or Ultimate General Gettysburg, where they actually show actual figures. For example, like if you play Ultimate General and you take a brigade and they have 3,000 men, there's a counter on the bottom left. It tells you how many of the soldiers you lost, and it'll say 500 soldiers lost, and you inflicted 1,200 enemy casualties on a opposing Confederate brigade or Union brigade, whatever it is. I love games that do that, actually bring in that kind of realism, because it immerses you in the game. I'm not very fond of games that have a board and they say, this destroyer has a value of 10, this battleship has a value of 10, this battleship hit a destroyer, now the destroyer is at a value of 4. It's not, as you were saying, it's not very immersive, into the game. You're just, I don't know, it's very artificial. I don't like that.
In general, I can look past it for most land combat games, and the reason is this. Yeah, you're right. That's not the exact amount of men. But if it's a tank unit and it's got a hit point value of 10, I can imagine that means it's an armored division at 100% strength. Whatever that strength is, I can say in my head it's core. It's a division. I have a sense of what that is. And as it loses strength, to me that's it losing its cohesiveness or its effectiveness, and taking casualties. And land units are much more prone to being worn down with attrition, which that sort of hit point model really represents, is -3, -4, -1. That kind of slow breakdown of a unit as it's ground into dust. That resembles land combat in a lot of scenarios. You don't get a sudden strike on a division that wipes it out because a magazine blew up and the whole thing went up in smoke. That doesn't happen for a mass of 20,000 men spread out over 5 miles. But they do lose 20 men here and 50 men there and 100 men there, and gradually they're ground away. That's the exact opposite of the way that naval combat works. Like, I don't know what a 5 out of 10 destroyer means. Does that mean its propellers are hit and it can't maneuver, so it's a sitting duck? Does it mean it's taking on more water than its pumps can pump out? And how the heck do you model catastrophic hits? Maybe this game will introduce something that accounts for all of that. But to me, that kind of an abstract style works much more effectively for land combat than it does for naval combat.
I could see your point. I mean, but I don't know. I feel like I don't understand why developers do that. Go over to that model of strength of 10 versus games that actually put in the actual the actual figures of 3,000 men or.
Not all gamers want to manage that, right? I mean, if you're saying 20,000 men, what does that mean to someone who's really not interested in getting into the minutia of it? I think games like Panzer Corps have a real appeal because they're simple, easy to pick up and play, and whether you're a grog in history or you just enjoy sort of interesting, mental decisions that you have to go through, or you like the history but you don't really care what a division is, it doesn't really mean anything to you because you're not a war nut, it appeals to different people. And I think there is some level of appeal of not having to worry about, 800,000 different numbers and graphs and charts and what do they mean, and what is a division, what is a corps. There's an appeal to just abstracting a lot of that out. I hear where you're coming from, because in general, one of the things that kind of bugged me about age-odd games for a while was I could never find the number of men in a division, and I know what a division should have. I don't know what a little red bar slowly wearing down means. I'm kind of arguing against my own point. But in a game like that, where it goes into such intricate detail about everything else in the unit, and then somehow it makes it difficult to figure out how many men are there, that doesn't make sense to me. But if it's a game that really isn't trying to go into that level of detail, like a Panzer Corps, I can forgive that, because the game's not trying to be an ultra-detailed game. It's trying to be an abstraction. I think it really comes down to game design. What is the designer trying to do? Are they trying to give me a simple, easy game to play that's just really intuitive? Or are they trying to give me a fully immersive experience where I feel like I'm Paul von Hindenburg and I'm managing 30 different divisions? That's where I think it matters. It matters what the intent of the game developer is.
I'm more of the Hindenburg case, I guess.
Sure, I mean, that may be your preference, but I guess what I'm saying is I can accept and enjoy either case as long as it's a consistent experience. Not that you don't go the ultra detailed route and then leave a few random obscure things out for no reason, if you're including how many bullets are left in the rifle that one soldier out of 200 has, whereas Panzer Corps doesn't even intend to touch.
Was that
no, I'm just going to the extreme.
I was gonna say, I was like, wow. Wow.
I'm just going to the extreme. But I mean, my point kind of stands in that if the game developer's trying to make an abstraction, then fine, that's fine with that. I don't think the abstraction is as convincing for naval combat, because I don't think it works for naval combat. Because as I said, land combat, it makes sense that a unit gets gradually ground down. Even for air units, it makes sense that an air unit would get gradually ground down into nothing. That, based on, and I'm not a historian, but based on all my reading of naval combat, is not even remotely close to the way that naval combat works. It's just not representative of it. So I'm interested in it because I said in our last podcast, not enough games cover the Atlantic, the Battle of the Atlantic in World War II. But I'm skeptical in that I worry this game system is not set up appropriately to deal with naval combat. But we'll see.
What's your, I'm just curious, what's your favorite naval combat game? If you had to put like number one on the list.
I guess it depends on what genre you're talking about. That's kind of a tricky question. Sadly, there aren't a lot of them. I would probably say Silent Hunter 3 for the immersion perspective. It's a simulation. It's not a strategy game.
What about like the strategy genre? Like, do you feel like if you had to put like something that would give you like a very authentic feel of being in command?
War in the Pacific, and here's why. It's not the best war game out there, but it tells the story of the Pacific conflict, in my opinion, better than any other game. And that's because when you get down to it, the Pacific Theater was about logistics. It was about trying to figure out how the hell you're going to supply these forces over this vast sea, this vast expanse, and figure out how am I going to ensure that I get enough people with enough supplies and enough equipment to my objective so that they can fight effectively at the end of it. And managing that and managing the advance across the Pacific at either the start of the war as the Japanese, where you're really doing things on a shoestring, but there's not a ton of opposition, or whether you're the Americans trying to grind down the Japanese Empire. To me, that tells the naval combat element is flawed in many ways. It's just, I don't think it's handled well. The air combat, I think, is done pretty well, and the ground combat works for islands, but kind of seems to botch the Asia theater, where there should be some level of tactics. You're not just landing guys on a small little rock and it's all about attrition and power. There's a lot more going on there. So I wouldn't say the combat is the best overall, but the logistics and just trying to figure that out from a naval perspective, I think tells the best story that any game has about the Pacific Theater. The UI, if you're not a grog, is a nightmare.
Yeah. Now you got to put a lot of time in.
Yeah, it's a bean counter game, but if you like logistics, it's the best game that covers the Pacific War out there. And I think it does the best job of telling what the Pacific Theater was really about.
When I was playing, I remember each turn I would have to invest a considerable amount of time going through like each base, make sure they're supplied, got enough things here for an attack, for a defense, and such. I remember it was a very in-depth game, but I kind of like those games because you pay. Offhand, I can't think of how much prices, but let's say $70 or $60, right? For a game like that, you spend it one time. But still, I mean, that game will give you like months, if not years and years of of replay value. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, versus something that you pick up I know it's a different audience, but you pick up like Call of Duty, for the PS4, you grind through it in 16 hours. There it goes on your shelf, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it that what is it? I'm trying to think when Admiral Edition came out. Was it like 2008 or 2010, around then? And
yeah, that's right.
I'm playing it now more than I ever did back then. And this is 7 years later. I can't say I've ever, maybe Mario, like a classic NES game, maybe you would do that. But that's more for nostalgia purposes. So there's no doubt it's a great game, but it really depends on what you're trying to get out of it. And for me, it does the best job of telling me what was the Pacific Theater when you boil it all down. What was it really about? And it does the best job, in my opinion, of telling what I believe to be the critical story of the Pacific Theater, and that was the ability of the United States to bring overwhelming force through an intricate and massive supply chain to overwhelm the Japanese. At the end of the day, it was a story of logistics, and it was probably the most impressive logistical effort in military history to this point. Yeah, what about you? What's your favorite Pacific game? I'm gonna guess you're gonna say PTO.
It's funny. I was gonna actually say that.
Well, you have brought that up like 4 or 5 times on this podcast.
Honestly, I don't know if it's maybe nostalgia, but I think the coolest thing is maybe because I was a kid and I played that game. I haven't played it for a while, but I think the cool thing about it was versions of that game. There was one where you're at Hawaii and you're Chester Nimitz and you're directing orders to individual fleets throughout the world, right? Throughout the Pacific, right? And you're checking out the status of the builds, aircraft, everything. You're basically, and you also have conferences with your generals. But then you can also sortie the first fleet, your main fleet, and then from then it's like Chester Nimitz goes on the boat, and you're part of, you're going on some kind of mission, whether to invade Japan or whatever, Guam. but the kind of concept, the actual gameplay changes. You're not at Hawaii. You don't have access to, your generals. You're out to sea. You have limited contact with your other fleets. The music, even though it was primitive for, Genesis days and stuff like that, it kind of immersed me into the kind of like the thrill of commanding this fleet and not knowing where the Japanese are, and in any moment I can be hit with a whole raiding sortie of Japanese planes that are going to rip my fleet apart. So it was kind of a mix between like a not a horror game, but kind of like a thrill kind of game with a strategic element to it. I thought it was a great mix. I thought it was one of the best games I've played. And
I feel like, at least with PTO 2, with the cabinet meetings you could do where you had to negotiate between the Army and the Navy and the executive on, who should get what resources for what objectives. I haven't seen another game do that since, and I would love to see more war games try and tackle the political element behind the scenes, tackle the rivalries between the Army and Navy, the logistical limitations, and the negotiations that have to go on behind the scene. If you were playing war in the Pacific and you had to negotiate with the Army to see, like, all right, what are we going to deploy to Europe? What are we going to deploy to the Pacific? Who gets what in the Pacific? What are the key objectives? Like, if you could kind of role play some of that, it would really it would improve the story. It would improve the gameplay. I think it would add an interesting new element. And that's one thing I really admire from PTO 2.
I'm surprised that no one's remade those games. Like, and I'm not saying,
I assume Konami was the developer, right? Konami? I think they were the developer.
I think so, yeah.
And I think they're still around, so I assume they probably own the rights. But I don't feel like they do a lot of war games anymore. At least I don't think they do a lot of games that come to the U.S. I think most of their stuff stays over in Japan.
What I don't understand is, like, a lot of people could, you don't have to actually say, hey, this is PTO 6 or whatever the new sequel would be. You can actually say, Pacific War, and model your game based upon a lot of those elements, like the conferences, like you were mentioning, or maybe the way some of the elements of the game.
I don't know how many war gamers care about politics, though. I feel like most war gamers are like, screw the politics. I want to move counters around the map and fight wars and be a great general. I don't think many war gamers sit down and think, I want to worry about logistics. I want to worry about rivalry between the Army and the Navy. I want to do all the, the stuff that probably made generals' lives a living hell back then. They want to do the quote-unquote fun stuff.
A good example would be like the struggle to get Eisenhower to be the supreme commander of all Allied forces. Right? And I think it was a book or a movie detailing how difficult that process was. And some people wanted money. There was other recommendations, and what kind of power should you be given, things like that. And I think that all comes into play into war games because, there's, you have strategy and tactics, but, a good example would be the Eisenhower thing. That was a huge monumental thing to have one person in charge of all Allied forces. I mean, we're talking millions of men. I don't think there was even an equivalent Soviet general, right? I mean, you had 3 major commanders on the Soviet side, but on the Allied side, you had one. You had Eisenhower. He was in charge of everybody.
Well, there's 2 reasons for that. One is Stalin was a paranoid freak who didn't want, anyone to be too powerful. Like, let's be honest. And the other aspect is, I think we kind of forget about it, but why Eisenhower, why the 5-star rank exists, right?
From what I understand, the 5-star rank was because you had Lieutenant General, which was filled up by Grant in the Civil War, and then 4-star Army generals, and they wanted to have a 5-star to precede all the other below ranks.
Right, but the reason, and I believe it was Pershing was the first 5-star general ever in the U.S. military, and the reason the 5-star sort of exists is almost to be a supreme commander, and Pershing was brought up to a 5-star because at the time the U.S. didn't have a field marshal rank, that's what field marshal in Germany was, a 5-star, and same for Britain. The 5-star rank, in theory, and I'm not sure if this dates back to Napoleonic times or when it sort of originated, but in theory, when it's used, is usually used to make someone a commander over armies that are not just of their own origin. So, like, in the U.S. military, you could be a 4-star general, and another guy could be a 4-star general, back in the day anyway, and seniority would end up deciding who's in charge. But if you're 2 4-star generals, in the Civil War, you could say, what was your commission date? And then, they'd tell you and you'd tell them, and then, whoever had the earlier commission date would be the senior officer. Same thing would happen. You see that in some British Navy fiction books where they kind of operationalize it, and they're talking, lieutenants talking amongst themselves to figure out who is actually in charge. But when you're talking about multiple nations getting involved, one way to kind of set yourself up so that you have the authority that that kind of a commissioning date thing may not pull the same kind of authority when you're talking about 2 different countries, right? So you kind of have that 5th star there, so you can be a general of the armies. You can be a general of multiple nations' armies. Whereas you don't really see it used a lot anymore, but if you had a multinational world war with huge forces involved, this isn't the exact definition of why 5-star exists, but that would give you that element of authority over 2 similarly tenured British generals with 4-star ranks and an American general with a 4-star rank. That 5-star ability allows you to kind of say, okay, who at the end of the day, who's the supreme commander? Let's not quibble over who was commissioned when. Who's the supreme commander? It's the person with the 5 stars. It's the field marshal. It's
what I like them doing. Oh, one thing that I remember after they did 5-star, and I think that we have 6-star generals now, right? If I'm not mistaken.
No, we haven't even had a 5-star since World War II.
Okay. I was under the impression we had a 6-star, but
and so, again, that may not be the purpose in other countries, but at least in the U.S., generally the 5-star rank has been used when we've been operating closely with European allies. You saw it in World War I with Pershing, so we had our own commander that was on par with everyone else in Europe, so we could operate on our own, and then we wouldn't be subordinate to France and England. And then you had it in World War II, where you needed to have Eisenhower so he could be above all the other British generals. And several other naval admirals or whatnot got to 5-star rank as well, and I can't remember if Bradley got there or not. But essentially,
I really doing was do you remember Washington when he took command of the Continental Army? I remember he was lieutenant general, and one thing that I remember reading was when they made the 5-star rank, they gave Washington an extra star above. Oh, it was also above 6-star, but I was wrong. So Washington still currently to this day, after I think it was even a congressional hearing or a law passed for this, that Washington holds the highest rank of all U.S. military commanders in all of U.S. history. Like he's the only 6-star general.
Apparently you're right. Apparently there was a 6-star rank. Pershing was made a 6-star. And Washington as well.
Oh, really?
I didn't realize there was a 6-star rank. Huh. I thought 5-star was the highest. Anyway, yeah. All right, so I stand corrected. But we don't even issue 5-stars anymore. It's 4 stars kind of the highest. And Washington was done posthumously so they could say he was the senior ranking officer in all military history because he was the first, president and leader of our armies that led us to independence. That's more of a ceremonial thing.
Yeah, he's the actual rank is general. General of the Armies of the United States. It was 1976. Wow. That's pretty cool. I gotta admit that's pretty cool that they did that. Yeah. Highest possible operational rank of the U.S. Army.
Wow. I need to look into that more. Anyway, so obviously I was wrong. But moving on. So
number 1,
I believe we still have to cover your most anticipated game of 2017.
Yes, the number 1, the top that I've been waiting for since. It's 2017. I've been waiting. I think it's been 4 years so far. Gettysburg, The Tide Turns. This game, I was one of the original Kickstarter backers for this game, and I was very. how do I say, excited and very anxious for this game to come out because up until that day, Shenandoah Studios, the original developer, made some incredible games like Battle of the Bulge and Drive on Moscow. And I still play those games today, and they're still incredible simulations. And they announced Gettysburg, the Tide Turns. They released a couple of screenshots. I actually even went down to their studios and got a look at some of the actual gameplay that they had for the Gettysburg, the Tide Turns. And it was an incredible game. It was, and one also thing I asked I forgot the guy, I think his first name is Eric. I forgot his last name. But I remember asking him, I said, is this a sandbox game? Can I play from day one all the way to day 4? And he says, yes, you can be in charge of all the brigades and play the entire 4-day Battle of Gettysburg from start to finish. And the one thing that really got me down was over the last, obviously it was supposed to be released, I believe, in 2013 for the 200th anniversary? Yeah, the 200th anniversary, right? Or no, 150th anniversary. And I remember it was postponed, I think, to 2014, and 2014 to 2015, and 2015, and we're at 2017, and the game's still in development. So I'm very anxious.
Yes, the game that caused Shenandoah Studios to go under.
I've been trying to figure out what happened with Shenandoah Studios, like what was the original thing. I wonder if that game was the reason why everything fell apart.
I don't know. I wonder, obviously they got bought out by Matrix or Slytherin. I don't know if they really went under, but it seemed like they were having success, and then shortly thereafter, they were no more, and I just wonder if the market wasn't there for the iPad. But I mean, it's an interesting looking game. I won't say I'm terribly looking forward to it. It wasn't one of those games that I've ever really followed all that closely. I think their games are a little bit too abstract for me. It seemed like, anyway. It was more like a counter kind of like board game. I played Battle of the Bulge, and just, I don't know, it's not one of those games that grabs me or it kind of pulls me in. But it's exciting to see it finally come out after such a long development. Hopefully it ends up, delivering, and I assume they're going to bring it to iPad and, try.
Well, it's actually going to hit PC first now, and then it's going to hit iPad. One real cool thing that Slytherin did, and I appreciate this, is when they bought Shenandoah Studios, I remember somebody asked them, "Are you going to honor the original Kickstarter pledges?" Because people like me and other people put in the money for a Kickstarter to back up this game, and they actually are going to honor those. So that's really cool.
Oh, good. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously they're not really under any obligation to do so, but it's good that they're gonna do that. That's always enjoyable to see companies do the right thing. I am also going to derail us back to the General Armies discussion because I realized General Omar Bradley was a 5-star, but he was promoted after World War II. He was the last person promoted to the 5-star rank. It was in 1950, but my argument of it being a rank needed to be able to give you supremacy over allied nations holds true because he was promoted to that during the Korean War, which my assumption was they needed to have a supreme commander that would be able to be above everybody else, regardless of commission date, and be the supreme commander of the multinational force that was operating there. So that's probably, I assume, why he was promoted to 5-star when he was, because it was in September of 1950, which, again, was during the Korean War. So, but anyway, not to derail your Gettysburg discussion. Anything else you wanted to add on that game before we moved on?
No, I think that's about it. The one real, I know we have a lot of Gettysburg games out there. I mean, we probably lost count at this point, but I think the real cool thing about this game is
there are 872 games on Gettysburg.
Are you serious? How'd you come up with that figure so fast?
I just made it up.
I was gonna say, I think you actually did a Google search. And somehow
no, but you just got to say it with confidence, right?
But I'm a big.
It's an alternate fact, okay? But anyway, so
I like that.
So yes, you're right. We do have a lot of games on Gettysburg, but I think it's almost the perfect war game, though. And that's why. Like, battles on Gettysburg, it's almost the perfect battle to model. You've got two forces that are coming to the field, collide by accident. One side has the advantage initially, then reinforcements come up and they can no longer kind of push back. But then, with other troops coming down the enemy flank, they're able to outflank them. And then you've got the second day where the armies are both kind of on the field, and so you've got them slugging it out on day 2, and it's kind of inconclusive. And then you've got that final grand epic of Pickett's charge on day 3, that last gasp by the attacking side to try and defeat the defenders. So, it's got, again, that meeting engagement on day 1 allows either side to be the aggressor at some point in that battle. And then day 2 settles into a battle of terrain and battle of just sort of, can you out-execute your opponent? And then again, day 3 is that climactic, almost like a grand finale in a fireworks show. So I think it's almost the perfect battle. Like, look at Waterloo, for example. Waterloo's kind of boring, right? You've got Napoleon come up, you've got you've got Napoleon come up, and then you've got the Duke of Wellington. Duke of Wellington, the entire battle is sitting on a ridge. There's not really, if you're playing as the British side, you're on the defensive until the very, very end. And you're just trying to hang on. And it's a battle of posts with, forts basically and dictating the flow. And yeah, there's some interesting stuff that happens with an epic cavalry charge and back and forth in the center. But at the end of the day, it's a battle of posts. It's a battle of fortifications. It's a battle of, essentially a small force trying to hold out against an overwhelming force until reinforcements arrive in the shape of the Prussians, and then they can go on the counteroffensive. But it's not that same sort of dynamic, both sides collide, either side can be the aggressor, then shift to a defensive, then then a massive counter attack again on that third day. It's much more static. And Waterloo's more appealing than a lot of games out there, but it doesn't have the same complexity that a Gettysburg has. Gettysburg's almost like a 3-act play, and Waterloo is more like a 1-act, 1.5-act play.
But the beautiful thing about Gettysburg is like I visited a lot of Civil War battlefields. I go to Virginia and Antietam and Gettysburg. And one thing that I will say about all the different battlefields that I visited, besides what happened at the battlefield, in terms of visiting there, tourism-wise, you can go to Fredericksburg and go through the whole battlefield probably in an afternoon, a couple hours. Same thing with like Wilderness or Chancellorsville, and I've been to all of these numerous times. The one thing I will say about Gettysburg is you can't do it in an afternoon. You can't do it in a day. It takes multiple days to kind of not only do the battlefield, because the one thing that Gettysburg has is very special is it's the battlefield, but also the entire town. I mean, I can't count how many museums and halls there are in Gettysburg that feature presentations on the Battle of Gettysburg. You have one museum across the street from another one, each one doing something different. One doing like an overview of the battlefield with like some small miniature figures. I mean, just incredible, just an incredible town. And then you have like entire restaurants devoted to, the battlefield. Like one of my favorites is the Blue and the Gray. Have these incredible burgers that are modeled after the generals. You can get the Armistead or you can get the Lee. If you ever go there, just get the Armistead. It's delicious. But
do they look like the generals? Do they like have an iron, and when they, they're cooking?
No, but they do put a flag on the bird when they give it to you. They'll give you like a mini flag.
That's a bit much.
It is, but the cool thing about it is I can tell you, I go for the reenactment pretty much every year, and I literally have to quarantine like maybe 4 to 7 days because the reenactment's 2-3 days. Doing the battlefield, for me, it takes about a day or two, and then museums and stuff like that takes another day. So it's a long thing, and it's very special. Something very special about Gettysburg. I haven't able to.
Well, it's the high water mark of the Confederacy. So the Confederacy's last great chance at victory, or at least that's the way it's been portrayed. And the Union, it's sort of the down and out army that's been defeated time after time after time, and it steps up and delivers a masterpiece of a fight. And it was so even. It's such a, again, it's like a 3-act play. You've got day 1, which is a near disaster for the Union. You've got day 2, which is inconclusive, and you've got day 3, which decides the entire battle. So it's, again, it's like a storybook battle in the way it's written up, and makes for a great game, a great, interesting, complex experience to model. And I don't think any other battle really has that. Maybe Shiloh, kind of, but it's so early. The armies are so inexperienced. The officers are so undefined. And frankly, the Western Theater, from a stand-up battle perspective, doesn't have the same allure because the Eastern Theater's been so focused on for so long that you have this sort of mythology that's built up around the East. Whereas the West, no one ever really truly challenged Grant in the West. He never, he had a few offensives that were thrown back mainly because Nathan Bedford Forrest cut his supply lines in various cavalry raids, but you didn't have a lot of stand-up fights in the West that were a close-run thing. Maybe Murfreesboro, but really, there were not a lot of close-run battles in the Western Theater, so the Eastern Theater has this whole 2 years of Lee's dominance against the Army of the Potomac, and then things shift. And I think that's what makes Gettysburg so iconic in that history, is you've got all this mythology and history built up around it, whereas Shiloh, you don't. It's kind of the first major battle there. There isn't all this history leading into the fight, and then you don't really ever have anything match it until maybe Chickamauga, but that's like 2.5 years or a year and a half later. It's just... Yeah. It's the big budget AAA battle of the Civil War. And even the other Eastern Theater battles don't compare. Antietam, the Confederacy's on the defensive the whole time. Antietam is very similar to Waterloo in that you've got this overwhelming force attacking a dug-in defensive force, and that's about it. It's an interesting battle. It's the bloodiest battle. It gets some history because of that. There's definitely a lot of history around the individual fights, but it's not that same sort of appealing game. A lot of game developers have tried to make interesting games out of the Battle of Antietam. I don't know if any of them have ever been successful. Sid Meier's Antietam certainly wasn't, at least when you compare it with, Gettysburg being regarded as, the ultimate classic of Civil War games. We're kind of shifting subjects here. So yeah, that's kind of my thought on Gettysburg. Moving on to my final, do you have any final words on that?
I'm curious to find out what yours is.
So, my final most anticipated game is, and I should have had a sound effect queued up with a drum roll, is Cold Waters, which I don't know if you've looked at.
What was that?
Cold Waters?
Yeah. No, but I'm about to Google it now.
So Cold Waters is made by, I think it's Killerfish Games. They made Atlantic Fleet, which I talked about as being one of my top games of 2016. And Cold Waters is going to almost be like, I think it's kind of going to be like a cross between like Fast Attack and like a third-person kind of strategy game. I'm assuming it's a strategy game, but I could be wrong. Essentially, you're a sub-commander in a hypothetical Cold War gone hot, and there's fighting going on around Iceland. And you've got to kind of stem the gap and, deal with Russian forces and insert special forces and do all these different submarine actions, except it's like Atlantic Fleet based on everything I've looked at, except it's real time and it's modern submarine combat. I don't know if you'll have the ability to command multiple submarines. I don't know enough to know truly if it will really be a strategy game, but in my opinion, it's the most anticipated game for me because I loved Atlantic Fleet. I didn't think turn-based combat worked well for it. They're going with real-time combat for this. There aren't enough games that look at modern submarines in terms of their role in a modern war. And I don't know what else I need to say. It's basically like a Red Storm Rising game as well. So it'll be really interesting to see. I think they said nukes can be used as well. So it'll be. I'm really interested to see what it looks like, and that's my most anticipated game of 2017. I think it's coming out this year. I'm not sure yet.
Union, and it's like a global map, and it has like blue dots representing U.S. or NATO, and red dots, I'm assuming, for USSR. Is it like? The map is of Great Britain, top of Soviet Union, Norway. Is that just like a campaign map, or is that like a real time?
So I believe they said there's a dynamic campaign. I believe. So I don't know if it's. I don't know what that is. I mean, I haven't played it. It's not out yet. But
sick.
It'll be interesting. So that's my number one. I don't have much more to add about that because I really don't know much. They released like a 40-second preview, which is, very interesting. I was a huge fan of Fast Attack back in the day, which I don't know if you ever played it, but it was like a modern U.S. Los Angeles class attack sub simulator, almost like an early Silent Hunter, but with modern submarine. And loved that game. Played the shit out of that. No shit. Now I got. Oh fuck. Now I got to put the Now I have to put the explicit tag on the podcast.
Nice.
So anyway, I suppose.
Wow, the visuals on this game are absolutely beautiful.
Like I said, it's Atlantic Fleet. It's clearly from the Atlantic Fleet engine, but it's a real-time game instead of turn-based.
Wow, it's on. It's greenlit on Steam, so I think you can buy it, right? Or no?
No, greenlit just means it's coming. It's approved. It's not in early access or anything. Wow. If it is, then I'm immediately going to hang up on you and go start playing.
It's for PC and Mac. Nice.
Yeah, so that's my number one.
Wow. I like that. That was a good pick. So
honorable mention too, because given that we're the Single Malt Strategy podcast, and I'd be talking about what I'm drinking, is I'm having some vodka, and nothing more fitting than fighting Ruskies while drinking vodka.
I am not drinking anything because I'm on a shitload of antibiotics. So
probably a smart decision.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to be on antibiotics for the next couple of weeks. So that's not going to be fun. But I wanted to give a couple of honorable mentions because there is get some exposure for these two things. First one is Patriot Battles from Digital Gameworks. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They used to be called Incredible Simulations and ISI Games, and Jeff Lapkoff Games, now Digital Gameworks. So went through a lot of renditions in terms of the company name, but he's the guy behind Defend the Alamo and Custer's Last Command. And he's making game based upon the tactical battles in the American Revolution.
Okay, well, it's definitely a topic that's probably undercovered in the sense that you don't see a lot of games out there covering the American Revolution.
That's why I'm very looking forward to this. So it's from that one's from Digital Gameworks. The other one, it's not a game; it's a mod, and it's just been announced or a couple of weeks ago. It's called the Napoleonic mod for Strategic Command.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that on the Matrix website. You would think, by listening to this podcast, by the way, that Matrix and Slytherin gave us a big fat check or, even a really small check, because enough people listen to us so that if they throw us $5, we'd probably just make a whole podcast about how great Matrix is. But our entire podcast has been talking about Matrix games pretty much.
Well, it's just 10 years ago we weren't talking about Matrix. We'd be talking about Paradox, but unfortunately, times have changed.
You Paradox hater! I've been playing the hell out of Stellaris lately and love it, and I enjoy Hearts of Iron as well. So just because you are up and crotchety and don't like Paradox doesn't make they don't make good games still.
I like Paradox, but I miss the days of Victoria or the traditional Hearts of Iron. I remember the days when they came out with Hearts of Iron 2, then expansion pack, another Hearts of Iron Armageddon expansion packs, then Doomsday. I mean, they were just coming out with crazy loads of expansions.
Are you telling me that Paradox doesn't make enough DLC for your taste? Because that's the first time I've ever heard anyone say that before.
I want more DLC. I want Cold War DLC.
Oh, good Lord.
I would deal with all the negative aspects of Hearts of Iron if you just give me I want a good Cold War strategy game. That's what I want.
I want that as well. I need to check out. I've played a little bit of Twilight Struggle, but I need to try and figure that game out. It's a board game conversion, but it's about the Cold War. It's incomprehensible to me at this point. But anyway,
I can't figure. I mean, I'm getting the gist of it, but if it's taking me this long to figure out the game, it's just I want to play the game. I don't want to spend hours learning. I want to actually go multiplayer head to head with somebody and start playing and enjoying the game.
We could go head to head if you want in a Twilight Struggle game. We probably will find a way that both of us end up losing, and Mexico ends up conquering the world or something.
Yeah, I'll have the Chinese win.
But anyway,
you have it on the iPad or do you have it on the computer?
I have it on the computer, but I believe crossplay is enabled, so it doesn't matter who's if you're playing someone online. I think it doesn't matter what they're playing on.
Yeah, I like that. There's very few companies that do that. I'm surprised they did that.
Guess who else does a lot of that? Matrix and Slytherin Games.
Yeah,
Marco, I'm waiting for my check.
They do it right. I'll have to. That's a big thing. I was hoping Apple would come out with that first week cross-play. But I gotta admit, it takes whoever designed that at Slytherin or Matrix. It was forward thinking because to say, look, we want to make a game that you can play across platform. The big boys haven't been able to do that, like Google or Apple hasn't been able to set something like that up. For them to do that, that's forward thinking.
I think it may end up coming to that. There's a few PlayStation 4 games and I think Xbox games that cross-play with PC. So I think, we may end up seeing that before too long. But anyway, that's probably a topic for another podcast. We've been going about for 70 minutes, so I think we'll probably cut it off here so we don't, put anyone to sleep. It's already getting a little bit late as it is. So I'll just say thank you, everybody, for tuning in with us. I know it's been a while since our last episode, but I really appreciate you guys sticking with us. It's been 10 episodes. It's been a lot of fun. I'm looking for 90 more so we can do a 100th episode special with all sorts of sound effects and relevant, sound bites. The first one I threw in there wasn't quite relevant. But, myself, Matthew, the historical gamer, just want to thank you all again for listening, and I'm going to throw it over to you, Dejan, and if you want to take us out.
All right, guys. We'll see you in the next episode. See you then.
Don't sound so happy.
Hey, man, I got a tooth pain, so I
Okay, you've got an excuse. All right, guys. Well, thanks again. Yeah. Until next time. This is the Strategy Wargamer, Jean and Matt, the historical gamer. Thanks again, guys. Bye.
See ya.